Miss Gwemja Lee, a reformed prisoner, is being released after 13 long years for a crime she claims she never committed. A Christian choir welcomed her outside with an offering of a symbolic block of tofu. She was convicted of kidnapping and murdering a 6-year-old boy, Won Mo. She was so beloved because of her beauty, a film was even made about her and her time in prison. Gwemja was even given a reduced sentence for her model behavior. She, however, doesn't see things the same way as everyone else and rejects the tofu. Gwemja reconnects with a former cellmate, Kim, who now cuts hair, although unlicensed. Kim says she's not as kind-hearted and soft as she used to be. It was all an act though, as she's been planning her next move for the past 13 years. She has a very bizarre but happy dream enacting her violent revenge. Gwemja cuts off her finger trying to gain the forgiveness of Won Mo's parents. She gets a job working at a local pastry shop. Gwemja reconnects with another former cellmate, Woo So-young. She asks her husband if she can help Gwemja with her plan. We see a layout of what appears to be some kind of gun. The detective responsible for putting her away is at her pastry shop. His wife freaks out as she doesn't want to eat something made from hands that killed. Gwemja tells her story to a young associate named Gwen Shik, and he gets upset. When Gwemja was 19, she was thrown out for getting pregnant. She called her old school teacher, Mr. Baek, asking if she can live with him. Gwemja breaks into an adoption office looking for information on her daughter, who was given up for adoption when she was put in prison. She finds her daughter was adopted by an Australian family. Gwemja goes on a little date with the young associate. She tells him she's going to kill someone and then takes him back to her place for a little lovin'. The following morning, she reveals the real killer of Won Mo was her teacher, Mr. Baek. They kidnapped him in order to ask for ransom, but the little boy was killed and Gwemja framed. Mr. Baek took her daughter and told her to take the blame or her daughter would die too. Gwemja finds her daughter Jenny in Australia, communicating to the family through a letter she wrote using a Korean to English dictionary. Jenny threatens her own life if she can't go back home with her real mother, so she's taken along. Gwemja gets her newly built pistol, but has to get up close as it has a very short range. Jenny asks her why she was abandoned, but Gwemja ignores it. The next day, Jenny picks out a puppy and they head out into the woods along with Gwen Shik. They find an old school and Gwemja shoots the puppy, trying out her new weapon. We get a flashback to her time in prison and Gwemja feeds a bully in the prison food that has been poisoned with bleach. All of her cellmates called her the witch and kind-hearted and would not refuse doing her any favors. Mr. Baek's wife, another former cellmate, meets with Gwemja to help her with her plan. A reporter is seen spying on Gwemja and taking photos of her. He reports to Mr. Baek, who is not happy. Mr. Baek calls his wife saying he hasn't eaten yet and will wait for her. Meanwhile, we see 2 hitmen sitting at the table with him. The hitmen watch as Gwemja and her daughter leave the pastry shop. We see Mr. Baek's wife tied to a chair while we hear the struggles of Gwemja with the men. Gwemja is violently beaten by one of the assailants. He turns and looks at his partner. Gwemja is suddenly standing behind him with her weapon drawn and puts a nice hole through his head. The other man has a knife to her daughter, but that doesn't stop her. She walks up and shoots his hand clean off. Mr. Baek is knocked out cold as his food was tampered with by his wife, who couldn't be happier. Gwemja arrives at Mr. Baek's home, pushing him off the table. She frantically cuts his hair. Gwemja and his wife bind his feet and legs so he can't move. They've taken him to the abandoned school. Bound and gagged, things aren't looking good for this child murderer. Pointing a gun at Mr. Baek's head, she has him translate to her daughter so she can finally know why she was given up as a baby. Gwemja will bring her daughter back to Australia once she's done with Mr. Baek, as her sins are far too great to care for a child. Jenny leaves with Mr. Baek's wife. Meanwhile, Gwemja has her weapon pointed at Mr. Baek's head. She just can't bring herself to shoot. His phone alarm goes off. Attached to it is the marble of young Won Mo, the boy he murdered, along with trophies from other children he killed. She removes his gag and knocks him to the ground. She chokes him with rage burning in her eyes. Gwemja is furiously beating on the man. Turning him over, she starts choking him with his own tie. She sits him back up, and before he can get a full sentence out, she gags him again. Gwemja pulls out her weapon and puts a round in each of his feet. We see police out searching in the forest, and Gwemja calls the detective responsible for her case. She meets with him and tells him had he caught the real killer back then, more children would not have died. Gwemja is searching Mr. Baek's home along with his wife. She gets a call from the bakery and Jenny's adoptive parents have come for her. Gwemja finds tapes hidden underneath Mr. Baek's desk. The detective is watching the tape along with the women, and he feels sick to his stomach as the tape features the abuse and murder of the children. The parents of all the victims are brought in to watch the tapes at the abandoned school. Tape after tape play as the parents are filled with sorrow, rage, and despair, seeing what happened to their babies. A woman falls out of her chair after watching the murder of her daughter at the hands of Mr. Baek. Mr. Baek was an English teacher in affluent neighborhoods. He moved from school to school, killing children from different classes, so he was never under suspicion. She tells the parents they have 2 options: let the police take him in, going the lawful route, or option 2. The parents discuss saying a trial will just go on and on. They argue over what should be done and who should do what. There's a speaker in Mr. Baek's room and he can hear the parents as they discuss his fate. Each parent is going to go in one by one and enact their vengeance upon the man that murdered their children. The parents are all sitting with plastic ponchos, gloves, and knives. One even has an axe. The first parent asks him how he could do it. She comes back out dripping in blood and visibly shaken. 4 more parents enter the room, their rage taking hold of them. They get to work. The man with the axe comes out all bloody and falls to the ground in distress. The final woman, a grandmother, comes back and they all stare at her as she sits back down. The parents start to clean up and remove the body of the lifeless Mr. Baek. They have their photo taken together so no one can turn on the others without implicating themselves in the crime. The families and relatives bury the murdered body outside in the woods. Gwamja puts a couple shots in him before they finalize the burial. The families all together at the bakery are singing happy birthday to their murdered children. Gwamja sees the ghost of the murdered boy Won Mo, who transforms into his grown self, the age he would have been if he was still alive. She finds her daughter and hands her a cake telling her to live purely like tofu. Gwamja buries her face in the white frosted cake and weeps as her daughter hugs her and the film comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you would like more, please like the video and subscribe. Thank you for watching and take care.